somehow worse taglines for this movie than House of a Thousand Corpses had. So I always tend to read the dumbest one, and this one is "Go to hell, welcome to I Hope You Suffer." There's also "They Must Be Stopped," which is also pretty bad.
At least "Go to Hell" is direct.
Yes.
Like, it's to the point.
It's
punchy.
I can't imagine that was on like an actual poster. That feels like maybe a DVD release, but that like I'm always baffled by some of the movies that we've covered on this podcast that like the taglines are just absolutely insane compared to what the movie is. This is the second episode I'm doing of, for some reason, rewatching all of the Rob Zombie movies that Kit and Katie said, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. So, this week, talking about The Devil's Rejects, and my guest is John Michael.
Hey there.
It only took...
glad to be thought of when, to be brought in as what, the replacements? Is that the metaphor here?
Yeah, I guess. So, it's... Kit's doing one of these episodes with me, but Katie was like, absolutely not. And I was like, because my idea originally was like the three of us, and then I would have like a guest each one. And then I was like, well, they don't want to do it. It'll be way easier to schedule stuff if it's just me, because me and Kit have like completely opposite schedules where like he's coming home as I'm getting ready for work. And so like to schedule all three of us, we have like 2 days out of the week most weeks that we could ever figure out anything. And then I was just like, all right, fuck it, I'm just gonna like do this one on my own as a little mini like side podcast.
Since you have your main podcast where you're doing the actual stuff that you love to do, I can see not wanting to spend that precious time that you have with your podcast co-hosts wanting to talk about Rob Zombie movies, I would assume.
Well, we kind of ruined it for Katie, because back in like old Twitter days, she would like Fridays would like watch and live tweet a movie, but she would put a poll up of like movies on Shudder, and we rigged one where she had to watch 31, which is like one of, I'm going to say, his worst movies, and like a borderline unwatchable, and she had the worst time, and she was like, I'm not watching any of these ever again. So she made the right decision. Although we're gonna talk about a good movie today, or at least I'd say probably his most concise and like best put together movie. And you said before recording this is the first one of his you've watched.
Yeah.
So I am curious because I think watching this, you could watch this without seeing House of a Thousand Corpses, because like House of a Thousand Corpses is basically like a cartoon of a movie. Like if you've seen a White Zombie music video, you've basically seen what House of a Thousand Corpses looks like. It's fucking weird. There's like interstitials between scenes that like he just filmed random people. Like there's like an entire like 3-minute segment in between scenes of these two people talking about like Skunk Ape that has nothing to do with the movie that he just like threw in there. And there's like scenes where almost the entire thing is done with like a like solar flare filter on it, and I don't know, it's very weird. And like Shane and I talked about it, and I was just like, I don't know, I don't hate this, but and like this movie's like I really liked House of a Thousand Corpses when it first came out, and then rewatching it I was like, oh, this is a mess. I don't back this movie at all anymore. But rewatching it this time, I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. But it's like, it's a real weird movie that like you could tell was a thing where like Rob Zombie was like, this may be the only opportunity I ever have to make a movie, so I need to throw in every idea I've ever had for a horror movie in it, and it just becomes this weird jumbled mess. And then he does this movie, which, is a pretty, like, straightforward kind of just, like, really bleak story. But, like, it seems like he had an idea and stuck with it instead of, like, throwing every idea he's ever had into a blender, which is how a lot of the rest of his movies tend to be. And
That
it's I don't know, it was interesting because I had not seen this or House of a Thousand Corpses in probably like 20 years. So
right.
rewatching both of these, I was like, oh, these, like, House of a Thousand Corpses is a mess, but like kind of interesting. The real big bummer about that one is like everybody in it's unlikable. Like, it's like, you have the Firefly family is way more over the top, and it's one of those ones where, like, unfortunately you're like rooting for them because all of the people they're like tormenting are just so like brutally unlikable. And so by the time you get to this one, it's like, I
They
don't
just
know.
make that change official. Like
Yeah,
they're now the protagonists.
they're the protagonist, but you're also kind of like, God, they're doing fucking horrendous shit.
You're not wrong.
So, I guess before we like really dive into Devil's Rejects, what is your history with Rob Zombie? I guess in general, were you a White Zombie fan at all, or like into his solo stuff?
That most of that stuff just ended up missing me by just not intentionally. Just you get your Dragula in the Matrix. You have Shane's famous Rob Zombie tweet, which I desperately love. Like that's one of my favorite moments on that fucking hell site.
Right.
But otherwise, yeah, no, I just Rob Zombie musically and uh, movily, that's probably not a good word, is just a complete blind spot for me. I it's funny. Yes, I this is the first movie because I watched. I haven't seen House of a Thousand Corpses, and so there's the experience. The closest experience I can have to compare this against is when I was in college. I was staying with a friend, and he had rented a random DVD from the movie store, and we put it in, and the movie started like, and we were in the action. Like it seemed to be starting. There was like no introducing of characters. Everything was just sort of popping off, and you kind of had to catch up and play like, oh man, Matthew McConaughey is a lawyer, and there's some shit about racism happening in this legal drama. It's kind of exciting because like you're already having to catch up on what's going on. And only later did we realize that it was a double-sided DVD, and we had actually started watching the second half of the movie.
That's very funny.
And actually going back and watching the first half of the movie made me realize this is actually a terrible movie. It's not good at all. But so watching Devil's Rejects, where it starts off with this family of clearly awful, terrible people, and then the first thing that happens to them is there's no introduction. There's no like, this is who these people are. It's just the cops show up and it's off to the races. It felt like my first reaction was, oh, this is like, I kind of thought this was like bold, sort of, and then 10 minutes in thought maybe I should check to do a little bit of Googling on this, and then realize, oh shit, this is a sequel. Fuck.
Yeah, and like it works out though, because like I said, and like even like I listened to like the commentary tracks for this, because there's one of just Rob Zombie, and then there's one with like Bill Moseley, Sid Haig, and Sherry Moon, and they're all like, like, yeah, you can, like, it's probably better if you do watch House of a Thousand Corpses, but like you can absolutely go into this movie without having to see that, because outside of like the like William Forsythe's character being like the brother of like a cop that's killed in the first movie, and just in general that these are three characters from another movie, like nothing really ties in like whatsoever. Like there's quick mentions of like, or like they'll show like when he's showing like the Polaroid pictures to the mom or whatever and stuff like that. Like there's stuff you see, but like for the most part you can kind of go into this without needing to see House of a Thousand Corpses, because
Oh yeah, for sure.
they're like the last third of House of a Thousand Corpses becomes an entirely different movie than the first two-thirds of it, where like it's just this family like tormenting these four like 20 somethings that happen to like unfortunately cross their path. And then like all of a sudden it turns into this weird underground Alice in Wonderland ripoff thing. And I was like, rewatching it, I was like, God, what is happening in this movie? And like, you get to this and like, none of it matters. There's like an entire plot in House of a Thousand Corpses with a character called Dr. Satan, which is like this guy that like, I don't know, they're like feeding people to, that's like a doctor that's trying to create like super soldiers or whatever. That is like, there was like a brief mention that's completely cut out in Devil's Rejects. So like, even like all of this stuff is like, this just doesn't even matter, because he, in the process of making it, was like, yeah, I kind of want to cut all of this sort of like goofy stuff that doesn't need to be in this movie and just make this like weird, bleak, sort of Bonnie and Clyde-ish like road movie. And it's interesting. Like, overall, like I said, I think this is probably, at least from what I've seen, his best movie, at least as far as like having a vision and sticking with that vision and like not going into other weird directions, because he's a director that like I respect. I don't have a problem with Rob Zombie, but like my issue is he needs somebody to edit him, because he has that thing where he's like writer, director, like editor, all this stuff, and like no one says no to him, and he just does all of this stuff where I'm like, you've bogged down your movie and like bullshit that doesn't need to be here. And like, I think this is the only one, at least in my memory, that I feel like, you know, it's like, it's a little long. I could easily cut like 10 minutes out of this movie and not miss it, but like, he's just telling a very specific story that's got a start, middle, and ending, and doesn't like diverge into like weird bullshit like the rest of them does. So I guess
I have a thought about that, actually.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because so you mentioned that House of a Thousand Corpses is like him throwing all of his like ideas because he doesn't know if he's ever going to get to do something again. I know that like I recognize that feeling within some of my projects that I've done before. So like props to him for really going for it. And you also mentioned that he, you know, needs an editor or someone to like sort of carve out the good stuff from everything that he's throwing at it. Have you done any Googling of this movie and Empire Strikes Back?
No.
Okay.
So I will say overall, I am not at all a Star Wars person. So that would have never crossed my mind. So this will be interesting.
Okay. So before we started recording, in the last day or two, I mentioned to you that I completely lucked out on picking this movie. Not necessarily. I mean, it's if this is gonna be his best movie, then I'll take your word for it. But what I really responded to about it is that without knowing too much about House of a Thousand Corpses or his stuff in general, your comment about him needing an editor is like, yeah, that's true, except if he wants to, say, rip off the plot structure of Empire Strikes Back, then all of the structure work is done for him by the movie that he's ripping off. Because like in the original Star Wars, it's the Rebels versus the Empire. They blow up the Death Star. The good guys win, but the big bad Darth Vader, the space cop, he survives. And so the next movie is about the revenge, the Empire Strikes Back. And so just briefly summarizing the plot of Empire Strikes Back, and see if you can figure out how this maps to the Devil's Rejects, is that the protagonists are almost immediately at the outset of the story assaulted by the authorities, who drive them out of their base. They all run away, scattered to the wind. They're used to being together, but now they're in separate little groups. They go off. The cops hire bounty hunters to go and track them down. The main space cop, who's out for revenge primarily for family-related reasons, he kidnaps and he finds them. He's torturing people. They at a certain point meet up at a brothel run by, well, it's not a brothel, it's a city, but it's run by a black man who is flamboyantly dressed and would probably be described as a pimp. In Star Wars, that might be metaphorical, or the product of some retrograde thinking maybe,
Right.
but in this it's a literal pimp who first of all threatens to, kick them out and or kill them, but then is like, I'm just joking, come in, let's hang out, we'll have a party. So they go in and have a party. Then it turns out that our black pimp is in fact made a deal with the head space cop to turn the good guys in, and he does that, and everyone gets fucked up, everyone gets tortured. Our pimp is briefly has a change of heart. He feels bad for what he has done. He helps the woman escape, and and everyone manages to make it out there, beat the shit, and there's one person that gets left behind with the promise that we will come back and rescue you. That is
R.I.P. Tiny.
Yeah, like if you just generalize it just enough, that is the plot of both Empire Strikes Back and Devil's Rejects. Well, the only thing that Devil's Rejects adds at the end is the shootout as they head towards the cops.
Which is interesting because there's a sequel to this that I actually have not seen yet. That's one of the two I haven't seen that I was like, when they announced it, I was like, how is that going to work? Because they get shot to pieces at the end of this movie. So I'm interested to see how they've, I don't know, retcon that. But yeah, that's kind of my thing. And especially with this and House of a Thousand Corpses, it's very clearly like Rob Zombie. Like these are two movies that very clearly show that like I think it's kind of common with a lot of first time filmmakers where like their first couple movies you can be like, clearly this is your Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like your big influence. This one, like they even mentioned Star Wars like 3 or 4 times in the movie because it takes place.
There's that scene in the brothel where they're talking, where the pimp says that his girls have to hustle more, and she's like, well, I could get into that space shit, and they're like, no, that brings out the real freaks.
Yeah, like I like 100% like Rob Zombie is, and he's of like the right age that like those movies would have been like pivotal to him as a child. And this, I absolutely like. He doesn't mention that like Star Wars specifically in like his commentary. Like he's always like, he talks about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think I want to say, I can't remember if he mentions it because one of the actors in this was in Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, but it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Henry, and then Bonnie and Clyde were like his, quote unquote like influences for Devil's Rejects. But like he clearly has to love Star Wars in some aspect because like that would have been perfect timing for him, and like that's literally the plot of this movie. Like whether he like consciously did that, because like I feel like a lot of people like that's just like a general, that feels very much like because Star Wars is like a space western, right? So like that's just like in general like a very western movie sort of like plot structure.
And it's not like anything, like it's like it was one of the biggest movies of its time. Like It's not some niche thing that only a handful of people had seen. Like to say you like Star Wars is not like anything of any particular. I mean, for me, reading 50 to 100 Star Wars books in the 90s might be a bit much, but just to say that you liked Star Wars is nothing of any particular noteworthiness.
Yes, especially the last like 2 or 3 decades where like it's just omnipresent all the time.
And if there's something I don't want to do on this podcast is express any kind of opinions on Star Wars on the internet. I mean, Jesus Christ.
I'll do it. I have been yelled at numerous times for being like, I've seen maybe one Star Wars movie and I didn't care for it. So
there you go.
But I've seen even 6 Death Toilet movies.
Even the Star Wars comparison to me, like I've seen people to talk about that in terms of, or what my experience was nothing about this was triggering my Star Wars impulse. Like the Princess Leia conversation was fun. I chuckled, but then it was when they showed up at the brothel and their friend starts being hostile towards them, and it's like, just kidding. And I was like, wait a minute,
that's just Mando.
And I was like, wait, this is Lando Calrissian, and he's about to make a deal with the cops to betray them. And then sure enough, that's what happens. I was like, oh fuck. And so I went back through the whole movie and then just started like pinpointing, like you kind of have to fudge some of the details a little bit, but like it is surprising at how much it works. And I'm not even saying that's a bad thing, because like as an example, like just for example, my one of my favorite movies of all time is Ron by Kurosawa, and it's a gigantic samurai epic that is just doing King Lear.
Right.
He doesn't acknowledge it as King Lear, but it is clearly King Lear, and it fucking rules. And that's one of the reasons I actually came away kind of positive on this one. I was like, yeah, sure, he's ripping off Star Wars, but like that I don't know too many people who would. It's a very different genre, a very different kind of thing. And he's just like, I'm just taking the plot structure. I'm like, you know what? It fucking works.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for like people that like will take a whole other genre movie and just sort of be like, I wonder how this would work in like this, this sci-fi movie, how this would work in a just down to earth, just straightforward, like, horror road movie or whatever. So that is interesting. I like, clearly that's nothing I would have ever put together, having I've seen I know enough about Star Wars from just cultural osmosis, but
Right.
like it was not a thing I saw until I was like in my 20s when I saw the first one, and I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. So I never
Right.
really dug into the rest of them. So that is interesting. Like, especially,
It's like that's like Ghostbusters and Goonies for me. Like this is stuff that like there are things that I watched like over and over as a kid, but like some stuff just never stuck, and stuff that people hold as beloved institutions. And like I'm not here to shit on anyone's love of any particular thing, but some if you want me to talk nostalgically about the Goonies, for example, I probably couldn't tell you anything.
yeah, that's like Kit and Katie are always baffled because I'm always like, yeah, I don't know. I don't have like any love for like Star Wars or like Indiana Jones or any of the stuff that like a lot of people roughly around our age were like way into as kids, because it was just like stuff that I either didn't see or was like not like my for some reason my grandparents had like I think Temple of Doom on VHS, despite I think they were just like, grandkids will like this, and like I was like, no thank you, I'm gonna go watch Jaws for the like 40th time as like a 12-year-old. And so like I had like very weird like touchstones as a kid that I feel like most people didn't, that like clearly influenced my flavor of things I like, and it just did not have like I just never had that like love for any of those ones that most people our age are like, yeah, this was like my childhood.
Yeah, it's. Uh, I mean, in my case, I guess maybe I was fortunate enough to have the prequels, and I don't know. I like the sequels to varying extent, but to have the absolute toxic Star Wars fandom just completely sort of completely decimate my interest in being an ongoing person who like is vested in Star Wars. Like outside of maybe a couple things here and there, I'm just like, okay, this is like a time in my life that I can appreciate for what it is, and like I can't take the years of reading those books back, but like I don't need to actively continue to give a shit about the dumb things that people get up in arms about when it comes to that particular
Yeah.
former obsession of mine.
So I guess with Devil's Rejects,
Sorry, we've been on Star Wars for a bit.
yeah,
Now.
no worries. What outside of the Star Wars aspect of it, what was your overall sort of take on it?
I Okay, this is not Star Wars specific, but I think this is a good way for us to get back into still talking about some of the nerdy shit while actually talking about the movie, because the thing that the name Captain Spaulding, it rang a bell for me, but I couldn't put my finger on it immediately as to why I knew that name. And then eventually there's the scene where they start talking about the Marx Brothers. I was like, all right, that's from Groucho Marx, and then there's a whole conversation about bringing in the film critic, and we're going to talk about who knows everything about the Marx Brothers as a sort of like, forensic analysis. We're going to try and solve the crimes by talking about the Marx Brothers for a while. I thought that was, I mean, as someone who likes the Marx Brothers, that was a lot of fun. But it also, to me, kind of felt like you're talking about in House of a Thousand Corpses. He's like sticking every idea into a pot and just seeing what sticks. And I feel like this is like one of those cases where he's trying to sneak out this one thing. And then it's also in a movie where they're like making fun of nerds, like the freaks who like sci-fi, or the critic is very broadly, possibly even offensively drawn character of someone who cares about all this nerd shit. But like Rob Zombie made this movie and put that in his movie, so like it really is him being a nerd as well, which I thought was fun.
Yeah, that aspect was interesting rewatching this because, like I said, I hadn't seen it probably like 20 years, and
Right.
I've always talked about that. Like, it seems like it was a thing that like was just like a news story with him for like maybe a couple months and then just disappeared. And I wish it would have happened, but Rob Zombie was attached to direct a biopic of Groucho Marx at one point, and
That
this kind of gets
yeah.
back to like my gripe with him needing an editor is like he after this movie he gets stuck in like his aesthetic of this like quote unquote like white trash like whatever you want to call it like very like he's just he's endlessly ripping off like the feel of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and
Right.
like you get into like Halloween as his next movie and the entire thing is like Michael Myers is in this like abusive, like southern stereotype like family. The stepdad's there leering after the daughter, and like all this stuff is like this weird broken sort of like his take on like a what I don't know. It's weird. He gets stuck in this like aesthetic he has and like has not been able to get out of it until he does like The Munsters, which was like his last movie as of recording this. Like which is a whole other mess of a movie, I
I
think. But like,
I forgot that that had already come out. I remember seeing something like I was seeing that there was a trailer for it, and then when I pulled up his Wikipedia today, it said 2022. I was like, wait a minute, that's 3 years ago.
yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Well, and then so like my thing with him is I'm like I've always wanted him to see him direct something that wasn't specifically a horror movie because I think it would be interesting to see what he would do outside of like his like specific aesthetic. And so at
Right.
one point he was attached to direct a Groucho Marx biopic, which I thought would have been really interesting, and especially after rewatching this, like clearly he's a Marx Brothers fan because he, like I forgot that entire aspect of this movie and like altogether did like never put together all of the names and all that stuff. And he also was attached to do a Broad Street Bullies like hockey movie at one point, which I thought would have been super interesting, and they just never happened.
With only the sample size of The Devil's Rejects to go off of, and not having seen his other movies, I would watch a Rob Zombie hockey movie.
Yeah,
No question.
I would be so interested to see what he would do outside of like a horror genre, and like The Munsters kind of is but isn't. It's still like horror characters, but it's just like it's a comedy. Like
Right. It's more it's playing less, I would assume, playing less to the gorier aspects
yeah,
of what we get in The Devil's Rejects.
it's honestly it's just like a colorized updated version of The Munsters. Like it's like a lot of people were like this is one of the best things I've ever seen and I was like this sucks. I don't know why you guys like this. But that is 7 movies away. I don't need to get
Yeah,
into
you don't have to
Monsters.
think about it just yet.
Like, so I kind of, I don't know. I really want to see him expand a little bit because, and that's one of the things when he gets into like Halloween 2, I think he loosens up a little bit. It's still kind of his like aesthetic or whatever, but he like, there's like weird dream sequences in it. And like, there's like an entire thing of like, Lori being haunted by like a white horse and all this shit. And I was like, this is baffling that anyone let him make this movie. And it's why I kind of respect it for being a real weird swing that he was like, well, if I'm going to make another Halloween movie, I'm getting weird with it. And then he
Yeah.
just immediately makes like a bunch of movies again that are just kind of the same feel of Devil's Rejects. And it's kind of a bummer because I am a well-known Zack Snyder hater, and
Right.
it's kind of for a lot of the reasons that like I wouldn't say I'm a Rob Zombie hater. Like I think he actually seems like a genuinely good person in real life, outside of like the movies he makes, and
Right.
like I want to root for him, but like at some point, like when you get like eight or nine movies that have the same feel. I'm like, man, come on, do anything else. Give me
Well, like
something.
someone who like I can respect the absolute energy of someone who keeps casting his wife in movies and wants to show off how hot she is. I mean, presumably that she is okay with that and wants to be included. Like, I actually had a counter of when watching this movie of number of ass crack shots of Sherry Moon in the movie.
Apparently, a
like as a
couple of
wife
those,
guy, like
a couple of
go
those,
nuts.
like I guess, were like body doubles.
Oh,
She
okay,
said in the
okay.
commentary, and that's I'm glad you brought up Sherry Moon because that's interesting. Is like like until I started rewatching these, I was always on board with sort of like the internet overall idea that like, hey, stop casting her in these movies. She shouldn't be the lead of all your movies. But he's the ultimate wife guy, and I kind of respect it
Yeah,
because, and like she has said, she was like, I had no interest in acting. She's done one movie that wasn't his, and it was like a Toby Hooper's remake of Toolbox Massacre, and she didn't want to do it. And I think Toby Hooper, and Rob Zombie were just like, no, you should do this. It'll be fun. And she was like, all right. Everything else she's done is just Rob Zombie movies. She never wanted to be an actor. She just kind of was like, well, he's making this movie, I'll do it. And then it just kind of kept being a thing. And like, I do get the like she I feel like outside of Baby, and I can't talk about Lords of Salem yet because I haven't seen that. I know she's the lead of that. Like, she shouldn't be like the lead in most of the movies that she's in of his.
and she's
But
not here,
yeah,
which is probably I think a good like a better balance. I would think.
I think she's pretty good in this movie. In House of a Thousand Corpses, she's very over the top because that movie, everything in it is very over the top. I
Right.
think her like um charisma isn't the right word, but like the way she interacts with like Bill Moseley and Sid Haig in this, I think she's pretty good in this. And I don't know. I kind of on rewatches have like changed my position of like, well, maybe, fine, keep casting her, I guess. Maybe don't make her the lead in everything. But like I do like that he's just like, hey, I'm making this movie, here's like he kind of has the Kevin Smith thing of like, I'm putting my friends and like
Yeah.
loved ones in all of my movies because that's who I want to spend my time with while making these. So I respect that. And like I think she's pretty good in this movie and like gets a lot more to do because in House with a Thousand Corpses she plays like sort of like an over the top kind of dumb blonde stereotype version of like the killer in it. And in this, like, they're like everything is so like relentlessly bleak all the time in it that like the little bit of levity that she adds to it, I think helps. Even though a lot of the levity is also horrendous shit that is happening. like, like the scene in the motel is
Yeah. Oh.
one of the like I went and saw this in the theater like the day it came out, and I did not expect how bleak this movie was going to be because like I talked in the House of a Thousand Corpses episode, like I saw House of a Thousand Corpses the day it came out because I was like a big White Zombie fan, and then like for there was like a 3 or 4 year thing where like House of a Thousand Corpses was being made, and then like Universal dropped it and was going to release it. All this shit was going on with it. And so there was like this big anticipation when it finally came out. I was like, oh man, the dude behind like White Zombie is always thinking about like horror movies, has finally made a horror movie, and like
Right.
Universal said it's too gruesome and blah blah all this stuff. And I loved it, but I like I was telling Shane in the previous episode, I was like, I was also like one of those people at the time where I was like, you wouldn't understand them. Like I only watch underground movies like Evil Dead or like Friday the 13th kind of like horror fan at that point. So
Right.
seeing House of a Thousand Corpses, I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And then I actually started watching like more underground horror stuff and was like, oh, this is just like ripping off all of this other stuff and whatever. So I went to see this in the theater, and like it was like deathly silent throughout most of the movie because I don't think anyone anticipated how like stark and bleak it was gonna be, and especially when you get to that motel scene, it's like no, like that there's like a 30-minute chunk where just like everyone was deathly silent because they were just like, God, this is harsh.
I had definitely had a hunch of like, because my kids are 9 11, and they've started expressing some interest in like, spooky movies. And so we've been showing them like some of the older ones just because by today's standards, they've probably seen worse on YouTube or whatever the fuck. So, but I definitely knew enough going in that I was like, I'm just make sure that there is no one in the house.
Yeah.
And yeah, that motel sequence is I was just counting my blessings that I was by myself, because my wife apparently had seen it when it came out in theaters, and she'd never watched it afterwards. And when I told her about it, she's like, yeah, that's kind of rough.
Yeah. Caitlin got home from work right as they got into the motel, and I was like, worst timing. Yeah, it's that scene. And like it's really interesting listening to commentary tracks because like Bill Moseley was like, I hated everything, having to do anything, and that's like that motel. And like I guess there was like Sherry Moon had to take like 2 days off after filming in there, and like all this stuff. It just sounded bleak, and I guess like like it's really weird because like I've watched a shit ton of like pretty harsh movies as like a horror fan, and like I don't know if you're familiar with like Hong Kong like category 3 movies at all.
Not by name, but like, are we talking like Audition and that kind of thing, or
No, so like kind of Audition would like is, well, I guess would be maybe like the Japanese version of category 3 is like,
oh right, sorry, Audition,
yeah,
Japanese,
yeah, no worries.
Apologies.
So category 3 is like Hong Kong's like their rating system. They have a category 1, category 2A, 2B, and then 3. And category 3 is essentially like their R and above.
Okay.
And so, and during the 90s, they created this rating system, and it was like basically they were just like, well, you can do whatever you want, but you're going to get this rating. And it became sort of like a genre in and of itself, despite being just like a rating. And
right.
There's a lot of movie I love category 3 movies from like 91 to like 95 was like their peak of like just when they were like kind of all really good, but like they all have upsetting like sexual assault scenes or like like Untold Story is probably like the most famous one, and there's a pretty brutal assault in it, but like it's kind of well known for just like over the top like brutal violence in it, and like specifically like the main character kills like a bunch of like children in it. But they like those movies are made in such a weird way where like there'll be this like really harsh scene that then cuts to like the police being the most incompetent, goofy people on earth. It has this like
something to break the
they treat like the police in all the movies as like the dumbest people, and there's there's levity to it. And this movie has like maybe 2 scenes in the almost 2 hours where you're just like, oh, there was like a joke in this scene. Everything else is just like nonstop barrage of just like violence and like harsh bleakness going on. That I was like, God, I forgot how like hard he went with this. I feel like there's the scene with like the ice cream when they're in the truck, and then that scene with like the critic when he's like talking about Groucho Marx, and he like starts arguing with the sheriff about Elvis.
Yeah, I'm not even necessarily sure if like the jokes are good. It's just it's so bizarre and not violent that I'm just like, this is silly, and I'm having a good time.
I think the ice cream scene is pretty funny, just solely for like Bill Moseley's being so against it, and just like you clearly see that joke coming as like they're doing it, like, oh, let's stop for ice cream, and he's like, absolutely not, and then it just hard cuts to them eating ice cream and he doesn't have any. But like almost like you said, like the beginning, you're just thrown straight into like a shootout and them fleeing, and then it's just like a road movie of them just killing everybody they come across until the sheriff gets him, and then he's just torturing them, and then then a fucking big shootout at the end. It's just like, I don't know, it's pretty like bleak throughout, and I don't know, I respect that for it.
I kind of like, I mean, this is probably not like, I'm sure there's other better comparisons, but like I remember watching first time I ever watched Hostel. Well, only time I ever watched Hostel. The violence was like so just extreme to the extent that like it didn't register to me as like scary at a certain point. It was just if there had been any sort of like, I don't know, attempt at discretion or implied, like in Jaws, you only, you barely see the shark, that kind of stuff, but they're just, it's so in your face, so extreme all the time that like, it doesn't even register after a certain point. Like, I absolutely don't begrudge Sherry Moon wanting to take a couple days off after filming that shit, because if it's hard to watch it for like the 30 minutes it's on screen, imagine doing it for how many days of shooting, right?
Yeah, and like they're like Bill Moseley talked about like how much he like didn't want to do that scene, and like had a talk with Rob Zombie, and Rob Zombie was like, dude, like not like all art isn't safe, like art shouldn't be safe. And then he talked with I can't remember, Priscilla, I want to say Priscilla Barnes, but I don't know if that's the right name, is like
who plays Gloria,
the actress in that scene that he's like,
yeah,
and she was like, no, like this is fine, I'm comfortable, like I have no issue with, she basically was like, this, like took control of how he was going to like use her body or whatever in that scene, and it like helped him so much to like be able to film that. And I think one of the things I think Rob Zombie is really good with is like hiring actors that get what he's going for and like understand like, hey, this is a movie, this isn't like real life, like I know what I'm signing up for, and like can take control of those things and just be able to like put them to film. And like and like just that whole scene is just so heavy. Even like the stuff, like there's a little like goofy aspect to it with like Brian Posehn being in it and stuff, but like it's harsh.
It definitely warmed my heart a degree or so to see Brian Posehn show up briefly and then sadly get murdered. But as soon as he shows up, you're just like, well, obviously he's gonna die.
Yeah.
Like,
and like
this isn't 90s comedy movie. This is The Devil's Rejects. Like, if he's there, he's not there for long.
Well, and I guess he also like were just like, oh, we'll just put like a dummy in, like, cause he's just in the room the rest of those scenes just dead, and he's like, no, I'm gonna stay. I'll just lay there. He was like so stoked to be in this movie that he was just like, I'll play the dead body for like a couple weeks or whatever it was.
If it wasn't, I mean, if there was an opportunity to play a dead body in maybe not that exact motel scene, but if someone else was like, hey, would you like to be a corpse in a movie scene and you'll have a day on set, I'd be like, fuck yeah, let's sign me up.
Jumping back, I thought when you were talking about like Hostel and like the violence in that, what's really interesting in this one that like compared to House of a Thousand Corpses, like the violence in House of a Thousand Corpses is like so over the top and stupid that like, because there's like a scene where like Rainn Wilson's character is killed and turned into like a fish man. Like it's very stupid. There's like,
I do like that sentence.
Like there's like this weird like torture scene where like he's like tied up to like this, like to a wall or whatever, and like Brick House is playing over it the entire time, and like they do like just really like dumb things like that, so like it kind of like negates the violence in it, where you're just like, well, that's pretty violent, but it's also very stupid in the way it's like being done. There's none of that. This is like so much of the violence in this is so realistic that you're like, fuck. Like, and it was interesting finding out. Like, I don't think I ever realized that like a lot of it was CGI until this watch. Like, because it's so kind of well hidden that like a lot of it's CGI. Like the scene where Baby like throws the knife into, I guess, Gloria's chest.
Oh yeah,
In the
when the
hotel
other
room and stuff.
in the bathroom, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that. That was CGI. Like when she's pulling the knife out, they talked about how like the knife was just one of those ones where there's like maybe like 2 inches for the blade, and then everything else when she's pulling it out is CGI. And I was like, it's all well hidden. A lot of like the bullet shots are CGI because like Rob Zombie talked about like just based on their outfits, it was almost impossible to like squib any of them.
That's interesting, and because like there's obviously like there's always a lot of conversation around practical effects versus CG and when to use either. I would have guessed that Rob Zombie and his reverence for these kind of movies would have preferred more practical stuff, but maybe it's just sort of this is the only way we can make it happen.
Yeah, I think this one he talked about, he was like, he was like, I wanted to do practical as much as possible. Like there were some things like, the the woman getting hit, like just obliterated by the semi. Like
Yeah.
it's just, that's just, you have to do CGI
And the
for
scene
that.
with like and the aftermath of like the blood and the entrails, but like that shot was the of all all the body parts strewn across the highway. That was the only time where I was like, well, that's obviously CG.
Yeah.
So like I guess good to him for being able to mask it as well as he did.
Yeah, and like I think he, at least in my memory, I feel like going forward it's almost all practical. And I think it was just this one, like he only had like 29 days to make this.
Right.
And like,
so at that point,
yeah,
it's
and
probably just faster to
like
do CG, I guess.
and one of the like the commentary with like the cast, like they were talking about, they were like, our clothes, because of just like the state they had to be in for us to just like, because they're like, Bill Moseley's just wearing like the grimiest clothes the entire movie, and he was just like,
Right.
yeah, like almost every scene, like the pants were falling apart or like ripping to pieces because it's just supposed to be this old like rotted like army pants and just a gross white tank top. And it was just a thing where like he was just like, yeah, it was just impossible to put squibs on any of these characters other than like in the big shootout with the cops at the beginning. So he was like, it just made more sense. It was just easier for us to do CGI, and he was like, I did as best I could to make it as like hidden as possible, and I think they do a pretty good job. Like, I at least I know when I saw it the first time, I don't think I clocked anything in it being CGI. I would have sworn, outside of clearly she's not pulling a full knife out of her chest.
Right, right, right.
I didn't clock any of it, so like I think that's a pretty good. They do a pretty good job of like hiding that stuff, especially compared to like we talk about it on IB Suffer all the time of like I'll see a movie from like 2014 and I'm like, Jurassic Park was 20 years ago. Why does the CGI in this look like such garbage when Jurassic Park looks so good 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's those kind of movies it's almost unfair at that point to, he got it right so early compared to everyone else who presumably has stuff you can buy at a Staples or whatever the fuck for software and can't quite pull it off.
Yeah, there's just like I get less aggravated with like small like low budget movies, but when I see like a major motion picture just as like hey, this movie cost us like $500 million, and I'm like, why is your CGI so bad? What is happening?
I never actually got around to watching The Flash, but like that one scene of him like
God.
trying to rescue all those babies that got passed around, that
That
was rough.
that movie is so bad. I can't even get started on it, but the CGI in general, like I was baffled watching that. Like the entire time I was like, who let this get released? It looks like I would rather watch like Spawn again for the CGI over that Flash movie. And Spawn has got some god awful CGI.
Oh man, it has been. I don't know if I've actually seen it since it came out. It has been a real long time. Not one I'd immediately leap to go back to.
I mean, it's fun. The CGI is horrendous, but
I mean, by the same token, like, there are movies I absolutely have affection for that just were using like the earliest forms of CGI that definitely have been surpassed by then. There's a charm to it.
Yeah. So what'd you think about? Let's talk about like the sort of ending. The entire movie essentially. I'm assuming people listening to this have probably seen it, but like essentially it's just like a cops chasing criminals movie, and eventually but like it's more of like a revenge thing as opposed to like a justice, like we're just gonna arrest him. This cop is like, no, I'm gonna kill all three of these people.
I did appreciate the touch of having William Forsythe spout a bunch of Bible shit. That definitely has not aged poorly, let's say, in the year of our Lord 2025.
He's so good in this like it's so funny that like in any other movie he would be the good guy, and in this movie he's the bad guy. Like you're essentially rooting for like the three Firefly family members as opposed to this cop who in theory should justifiably be the good guy because he's going after these people that killed his brother, but like you're like, no, I just can't wait to watch this dude die.
We're not here for moral complexity. We're gonna make the cop a sadistic religious piece of shit, so that you can cheer for the serial killers who seem relatively virtuous by comparison.
Well, it's also like I think like Shane and I talked about in like House of a Thousand Corpses like how perfectly cast like Bill Moseley is in it. And like in this, I think it's even more like him and Sid Haig are so good as these characters, and like they're just doing the most horrendous things, and you're just kind of like, I like these dudes.
I had a question about Bill Moseley in this, and or I guess it's more of a Rob Zombie question, but here it's about Bill Moseley. Does Rob Zombie across the rest of his movies cast people and dress them to look like himself? Because that. I agree. Sid Haig and Bill Moseley are great. They're I really enjoy their performances in the movie, but I couldn't help but be distracted by the fact that Bill Moseley just looks like Rob Zombie in this movie.
I mean, basically, it's like I said, like he has his like aesthetic, and almost everyone in all of his movies, despite whatever time period it is, feels like they just fell out of like a 70s rock band that has just been touring in a van for like a year and hasn't showered. Like they all just kind of feel like that, and that's like I said, it's like my big gripe with him as a filmmaker is I'm like, I need you to do like something different at some point because I'm rooting for you. Just get out of your own way. But like, yeah, like this is probably like the most like I feel like he said that because Bill Moseley is like in House of a Thousand Corpses is less dirty, I guess. He's almost like portrayed as like somebody that has like never left the house. He's so pale in it and has like he almost looks like he's supposed to be kind of like albino, and then in this one they just kind of like he just looks like a normal dude who hasn't showered for like a month. But yeah, him and Sid Haig, like honestly, everyone in this movie is pretty good, and like he's pretty good at casting. Like I think this is the first movie you really get it, start seeing it where he's like, I'm casting a bunch of people from movies I watched growing up, like Ken Foree from Dawn of the Dead and Michael Berryman from The Hills Have Eyes, and Danny Trejo's in it, and like
DDP. Oh my god!
So I guess Chris Jericho was who was originally going to be cast as Danny Trejo's character.
Okay.
And Rob Zombie was like, "You're too pretty. I can't have you in this movie." So they cast
Yeah,
Danny Trejo
Danny Trejo
instead.
does make more sense. I have no concept. Like my wrestling fell off like basically after the Attitude Era, so I have no concept of what Diamond Dallas Page is all about. I mean, the odds are probably not good that he's a person worth following, but like I remember enjoying him as a wrestler in the '90s and seeing him here, just looking like absolutely, he looks like a fucking Frankenstein. It is he really piece of shited himself up for this movie in a way that I was like, you know what, that is absolutely respectable.
I actually think, as far as, 90s wrestlers and back go, he's one of the least problematic ones. He
Oh,
he
well,
seems
hey,
like, because he got injured and then like and had to retire, and like started doing yoga, and has like he created his own, it's called like DDP yoga or something like that, and actually was
yeah,
like responsible for like helping Scott Hall get clean, and like Jake the Snake Roberts, and like all these people, and kind of like help, like has spent a lot of his time like helping like rehabilitate, and even like helping some of these wrestlers like get off, like painkillers and stuff like that. So like, there may be some like I could see him being maybe like problematically like religious or something like that. But like, as far as I'm aware, he seems like he's one of the, like, he's not Hulk Hogan, I guess I'll say.
right. Yeah, that's the bar you have to clear is don't be
Yeah.
Hulk. That's fair. Well, kudos to DDP at that point.
Yeah.
I also wanted to make sure that, like, if we're talking about people who know what they're doing, Leslie Easterbrook as Mother Firefly,
Oh yeah.
like she doesn't have a lot in this movie besides just to be tortured, but like fuck, like she knew what she was doing and she did the hell out of it. I really respected that.
She's so good. And in House, Karen Black plays it in House of a Thousand Corpses. And I guess she wanted more money and they just could not afford it, so they like recast. And I
Hmm.
think I think she's like, I love Karen Black, but like I think she's better in this than Karen Black was in the first one. Like it almost feels like an almost like completely different character. And it's, I don't know, I think it works really well. Like the scenes with her and the sheriff, like William Forsythe, are like antagonizing each other, are so good. And
Yeah,
like
the
the
absolute energy of like, no, I'm not going to, I'm going to say all of the worst possible things I can say to try and get under your skin, and giving no fucks. Like that would be it's the courage, let's call it,
yeah.
is great.
The like that first scene when she like pulls out the scrapbook and she's just like ranting and like spinning in the chair is, it's just so well done. Like she's killing it. Like I said, like almost everyone in this movie is just like bringing their A game, and it's probably for me what makes the movie the most watchable, because like the story is pretty generic overall. Like if you've seen almost any, like I said, like one of his big inspirations was like Bonnie and Clyde, or like I feel like probably he won't say it, but like Natural Born Killers probably was somewhat of an influence on it.
It would seem likely,
And
yeah.
like, so if you've seen any of those movies, you've seen the plot of this movie. But I think the thing that makes it the most watchable is the cast, because like they're all just, they're killing it. Like I said, like Bill Moseley and Sid Haig, even Sherry Moon, are all really good in those roles. Like William Forsythe is just like unhinged. Like the like you said, like, or Danny Trejo, Diamond Dallas Page, even like the little bit they're in the movie are super good. Like Ken Forhay, like just chewing all the scenery and like that weird brothel town he has. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, he, I again, I don't think that maybe like Sherry Moon just a slight bit less, but I can't think of anyone else in the movie who wasn't just going for whatever it is that they needed to go for.
yeah. So yeah, like I think the one thing I really want to talk about is like William Forsythe, of like, convinces Ken Foray, or basically like blackmails him or whatever, into like giving up the three of the Firefly members left. And then there's just like this extended, like, kind of insane torture scene where he has them back at their house, where he's like staple gunning to their chest, like pull like the fucking pictures of like people they've murdered, and like
that was intense.
And like I guess all the stuff with like the cattle prod was like not scripted. At some point, William Forsythe was like, I feel like I would have a cattle prod. They're just like, all right, let's do it.
To be an actor and just have that thought and have it make sense,
and like have someone be like, actually, you're right, I think they would. Someone go find a cattle prod.
And make sure to take the batteries out.
So the scene when he lets Baby go and he's going, like, they're doing like the most dangerous game hunting scene or whatever, there's like cow noises happening in the background because like they're on a farm.
Right.
And they all had to specifically be like, those aren't the cows making noises. That's William Forsythe doing that to like just be fucking weird and creepy. And
wait,
like,
so actual cows are making noises, but they put it into the movie that it was William Forsythe.
No, William Forsythe is making those noises in those scenes.
Oh.
And I was like, that's horrifying. I was like, I can't imagine being chased by somebody and they're just making weird cow noises at me the whole time.
I'm gonna have to make a note of that. That's if I should ever find myself in need of a psychotic rage, I'm gonna start mooing at people.
just slowly chasing them, like they're running, you're walking, and you're just mooing at them. And I kind of love that, like, Tiny, of all people, is who saves the day, because Tiny in this and House of a Thousand Corpses is like kind of just there to be like, not a spectacle's not the right word, but like Matthew McGorry was like a 7-foot something tall dude. He's just huge. Like, it doesn't really do much. He's just kind of like there, never talks, and is, you know, just like around. And in this, like, you see him at the very beginning, and then it's just like he's not in the rest of the movie until he just randomly pops in and grabs William Forsythe and like breaks his neck. And I kind of love that he's like the guy that essentially saves the day.
And then gets to have his, well, this might not land for you, not being a Star Wars person, but gets to have his Han Solo moment of like, you know, everyone's saying, you know, they're going to come back and rescue him after he's, you know, doesn't get to escape with them. And yeah, no, I like Tiny's moment at the end.
Yeah, I think it works really well of like I guess like Rob Zombie said that they had filmed a scene where he was going to like have dialogue, and he was like, it felt like not right. And just having him just kind of like Bill Moseley, like Otis is just like, you sure like this is the right move? And he just kind of like shakes his head, and they're like, all right, we'll be back for you. And he's like, he knows, he's like, there's no one's coming back from this, and just like walks back into the house while it's on fire. And like, yeah. I forgot, like in my memory, he like just walked back into the woods from when I first saw it. And then rewatching this time, I was like, oh no, he goes into the house, back to the fire. Because I said something in like the episode with Shane on House of a Thousand Corpses where I was like, I'm interested because I was like, I'm pretty sure Tiny is just like alive at the end and no one else is. And then I was like, oh no, I was wrong. Like everybody I thought died until they make a sequel to it.
Yeah, I know that he made another a sequel to this, and I'm curious. I mean, I could just Google it, I guess, but it's just more fun to imagine, like with the shootout that they head towards the end. It's not necessarily like, you know, until it follows the rules of if you don't see a body, you can't assume that they're gone forever. But like, it's certainly the mind sort of races at like, how do you make a sequel to a movie where they're headed towards the cops, almost certainly about to die?
Well, you all like technically you don't see them die, but it's like, yeah, they get riddled with bullets and they've already been like bleeding out for like hours. I'm assuming at that point. But like so like I said, I haven't seen 3 from Hell. The only thing I saw like the beginning of like the plot synopsis, and it was just like after like barely surviving the shootout, I was like, come on. I was like, nobody survived this, but I guess I'll see. Um, I'm not looking forward to it because I know like Sid Haig died like during the process of them filming it, and I know he's barely in it, so I'm like, and like that's, I don't know, one of the major draws I feel like of these first two movies is his Captain Spaulding. So I don't know. I'm gonna see. What did you think of that like final scene? The playing all of fucking uh, Leonard Skinner as they're driving into like the shootout.
It felt like the if the escape from the house was like the end of the story, then like the car chase in that, or that, you know, the shootout and the last thing is just sort of like the encore. You come out for one last run, you play the fucking banger, go out on a high note. That was the energy I got from it. So like, even though it, you know, neither here nor there, but it's like, he's having fun. Let him have his fun.
Yeah, I think like it kind of sucks because I think it's like a pretty perfect ending for these characters. So like the fact that I know there's another one, I'm like, man, you like you kind of
Yeah,
ruined this like pretty, like it's pretty well done, and like I hate Leonard Skinner, but I think it's a pretty good use of that song. And
right.
like I've seen a lot of people be like, I don't like Leonard Skinner, but I think that is like that scene, what like the way that scene is shot and like the use of that song kind of like made me change my mind on that song or whatever. And it did for me. I still do not like that song, but I think it works really well. And like, you know, it's all like, I guess that's another scene where he was like, there's technically dialogue in that scene that I filmed, and I just decided it was much better to just have it be silent. There's like an entire unspoken thing of like Otis giving Captain Spaulding like the better gun to be like, you know, because there's an entire thing about the movie where like, so in House of a Thousand Corpses, you don't know how any of these people are related outside of, I think, the mom and baby. Like, you just kind of assume Otis is like the brother, but like Captain Spaulding is not part of the family in House of a Thousand Corpses.
Hmm.
He's like this auxiliary character that like you never actually find out in that movie that like he is working with this family. And so when it's like, it's kind of revealed that like he's baby's dad, and I guess like I think they said one of the commentaries that like ideally he's like Otis's stepdad in it.
Okay.
And so like there's like this sort of like stepson stepdad rivalry between Captain Spaulding and Otis where they're just constantly bickering. And there's like this unspoken moment when they're like, they, you know, they're driving and they stop, and you just see like this blockade of like, I don't know, 50 policemen with like guns drawn. And so Otis starts like handing out guns, and he specifically hands like the better gun to like Spaulding. And so like, I don't know, there's like this like just kind of like nice, I don't know, sweet isn't the right word, but like sweet moments in that ending that like, I don't know, it all kind of really works for me. And I kind of hate the idea that there's a sequel to it, because I think it's a pretty well done and like perfect and fitting ending for these three like horrific characters that you're still somewhat rooting for.
Well, yeah, because I mean, the even if you just have to do the mind gymnastics of like, I'm rooting for these awful killers, you can get like in the course of a 1-2 hour movie, you know, it's 2 hours, right? But if you're you know, trying to make that a thing that you can do without changing the characters themselves, or just kind of like really wrecking with what is going on there, I don't know how you make that sustainable. So why not just do the one thing the one time, get your, you know, get your movie made, and then, you know, don't risk it. If that feels like the riskiest thing to do would be to try and keep hitting that note when you barely make it work the first time or the first two times.
Yeah, like I've said, I haven't seen Three from Hell. did not get very good reactions from people. As like when it came out, it seems like not a lot of people enjoyed it. So not looking forward to that, but I am slightly interested to see like how that story continues, but I don't know. I'm sure they because I think that came after 31, and 31 is pretty unanimously like reviled in his filmography. Like that movie is terrible, and I'm sure it was one of those things that somebody was just like, "Hey, here's a couple $1,000,000. You want to do another one of those Devil's Rejects movies?" And he's probably like, "Yeah,
Fucking Malcolm
fine."
McDowell is in 31.
Yeah, barely.
Oh, okay. Thank you for saying barely, because I was like,
The,
might have to see it.
the entire plot of that movie is like essentially a bunch of rich people that like kidnap people on Halloween to put them through like not saw traps is the right word, but they're just in this big ass like area where they're like constantly getting tormented and like tortured by people for like the rich. And if my memory is correct, Malcolm McDowell is just like one of the rich people that just like gives a speech at the beginning and then just like gone.
They got him for one day.
Probably. I mean, he plays Dr. Loomis in the Halloween remakes Rob Zombie did. So,
Okay.
and which I think he's pretty good casting as Dr. Loomis because he's unhinged in them.
See, the childhood nerd in me thinks back to Star Trek Generations, where he's the villain in that one, and that's. I mean, I know that obviously the cool choice is Clockwork Orange and shit, but I knew him as the bad guy in Star Trek 7. So
he's always Caligula for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is not that we need to dwell on it, but like this is where I think my interests overlap the most is our mutual love of Jeffrey Combs, and basically anytime I see an actor on screen and I recognize where they are, or I know that person, but I don't know where I know them from. The answer is always Star Trek. It every single time. Yeah. It is like my wife has literally told me to stop saying that because it's like it's every time. It never fails. It's always Star Trek.
Well, I feel like a lot of those character actors pop up on Next Generation a lot. Like, or maybe not a lot, but like a lot of the, they'll have like Jeffrey Combs clearly has for some reason 400 different characters in Star Trek.
He sure is.
But like, there's like all of those kind of like big character actors had at least one role in Next Generation, it seems.
I mean, Andrew Robinson from Hellraiser was recurring on Deep Space Nine and like with the best character. So the best character that had a regular role there. So like they were definitely watching their scary movies for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything else you wanted to mention about Devil's Rejects?
I hope that I didn't talk too much about Star Wars about this, but it really was the moment where I realized that I would have something to contribute to this conversation where I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was interesting because as you were like telling me that, I was like, oh yeah, that checks out. Like that makes sense. And it would make sense that whether that was a conscious decision or not, it seems like something that would be in his psyche regardless.
Absolutely.
And I mean, like that's at this point a tale as old as time. So I would be lying if I said I'm gearing up to watch all the other Rob Zombie movies, but like because it was this one specifically and because of his, let's say, nerdier tendencies that shine through in this movie, I was like, you know what, there's something here. And that is like, to me, my biggest takeaway is like I would be at least willing to try, even if I know just based on what you've said today that like it's not like it's going to be great going forward. But he caught my interest, and that's not something I necessarily would have expected. So kudos. Like this was a weird one, but it was fun. Yeah, I would say if you decided to watch anything else, I would say maybe watch like Halloween, because like are you a fan of like the Carpenter Halloween?
I've seen the first one.
Yeah.
So I would probably watch the Halloween one.
The thing he does differently that I kind of actually do enjoy, at least in my memory, because like all these movies I have not seen, and actually I watched the Halloweens. I did a full Halloween rewatch, I think around the time that they were doing that last trilogy. And like he dives a lot more into like the psyche of Michael Myers in the first Halloween, because they focus a lot on child Michael Myers and then him in like an asylum and stuff before he breaks out, that I think is kind of interesting and like a more like fun's not the right word, but like a more fun take than just sort of the, hey, this something happened to this kid, now he's killed a bunch of people. Like they kind of give you a reason where you're sort of like more sympathetic to Michael in it. And so I'd be interested on your thoughts if you like watch that. And like I said, Halloween 2 is really weird, and I respect that he was like, I didn't want to make another one, but they essentially backed up a pile of money, and I was like, I'm gonna do what I want to do with it. And like most people hated it, but I'm like, you know what? Kudos, you did something real weird with this that I respect that you taking this swing.
I mean, people seem to keep giving him money, so like, why not, right?
I guess again, I think it comes down to sort of like the Kevin Smith model of like, Kevin Smith like has a diehard base that will go see those movies. Like, if you give Kevin Smith like, you know, $2 to $3 million to make this movie, he'll net you a profit. Like he'll get you like that 10 million in like, you know, box office and then whatever DVD sales and shit. So like that's how some of these people keep making money or keep getting to make movies, whether, you know, the general audience likes them or not. Like,
right.
you get that base. Like Rob Zombie's like, he's one of them that he has that diehard base. Like people like his movies overall, and they will go see them when there's a Rob Zombie movie. So, I mean,
you psyched for that inevitable Dogma 4K that'll probably come out, I'm sure.
I am a lifelong Kevin Smith apologist. So, and
I probably only know like up through his first like handful of movies, but I always have a special place in my heart for Dogma.
Yeah, Dogma's so good, and like I have the DVD that is wildly out of print still.
Right.
So I'm hoping there's finally that, even if anything, it's just like pops up on streaming again, so people can watch it and not a shitty YouTube video.
Yeah, I guess that is the ultimate goal here, is watch it, and yes, if we could get a physical copy, great, but if not, streaming would be fine.
Yeah, I always back. Like, even like there's like a couple Kevin Smith movies where I'm like, well, this isn't like my favorite, but like I still back him. I think he just seems like overall just like a good dude that's just doing what he wants to do. So I can't hate on that too much.
I got no beef with Kevin Smith for sure.
So people fucking just do not like him for some reason, and I'm like, he has done absolutely nothing to anybody. It's very weird. The things,
leave Kevin Smith alone.
Like just some of the things, like some of the people that people just get like so mad about online. I'm like, why? Go yell at Elon Musk.
Yeah, it feels like there's bigger things going on in the world we need to be worried about than Rob Zombie and or Kevin Smith.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I would, out of all of the Rob Zombie movies, I would say if anyone's gonna watch any of them, watch this one. It sounds like you overall were like, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I had a good time.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking me to come on and then having this be the only movie that I legally had access to watch. Right. So
you could have lucked out and like just got one of his real bad later ones.
Oh man, imagine if the one I lucked into was like 3 from Hell or The Munsters or something that's more recent and accessible. I would be completely lost. So
it would have been very funny to have to be trying to explain 2 movies to you for 3 from Hell. Well, like the first one, real weird. Second one, real dark. I don't know what's happening in this one.
I mean, with House of a Thousand Corpses, like, I have not seen it. I could read a summary if I wanted to, but like, I think I can more or less like sketch the outlines of weirdo Texas Chainsaw Massacre murder family kind of things. So it didn't. Those context clues, I'm assuming, is all I need, really.
Yeah, House of a Thousand Corpses, like, even reading, like, a plot breakdown would not prepare you for how baffling that movie is. Because, like, I guess there was, like, a almost a year period between principal filming and, like, editing and stuff of the movie where, like, he didn't know if he was even going to come out, that he just shot extra stuff in, like, his basement that he just splices into the movie. That's just, it's so weird. Like, if you ever decide to watch that, you have to let me know what you think, because you're gonna watch it and be like, I don't know how they got to Devil's Rejects from this.
I think I will. I don't know if we'll do another podcast about it, but I will definitely report. I'll definitely find a way to watch it and report back.
All right. Do you want to tell people where they can find you and your music and all that kind of stuff, your podcast?
Yeah, for sure. The music front is pretty quiet and fallow these days for me. But I did last year put out a physical release of an album I put out under the name Anabaptists, under Jeremy's label Philip K. Discs. I know Jeremy would appreciate if I plug that, because he put a lot of work into making that a real thing that exists in the world and not just a link on Bandcamp. So I think someone the one review we got for it was someone describing it as the sound of a meth-filled arcade. So take with that what you will. These days, most of my energy is going towards a podcast that I do with my friend Chris from Nine Circles called Cinema Duel. We usually just every month pick a theme, and then we each bring a movie to talk about. And sometimes we get highbrow with it. Sometimes we get real stupid. I don't know if anyone else is doing podcasts about Condor Man, but I definitely have it on lock as being the world's premier Condor Man podcast. We also have a website as well, cinemaduel.com. It's not the most active, generally speaking. We don't have like regular scheduled content for it, but every year Chris does his Hooptober marathons, where he reviews 31 horror movies every month of October. And then currently we're actually him and I are working on a series together where we go through the complete filmography of Akira Kurosawa, which is the filmmaker that have initially brought us together as like friends and we got together because we both like Kurosawa and would eventually end up doing a podcast together. So, which is why I was watching Ron this morning. So, if that's the thing you like, cinemaduel.com for the website or the podcast is probably the best place to find Chris and myself.
Yeah, go listen to Cinema Duel, where you can hear people talk about good movies most of the time, as opposed to whatever dumb garbage we're doing on I You Suffer.
I did make Chris watch Arlington Road, a movie I remembered from my childhood as being kind of wild, and it turns out it's just a really terrible ripoff of Parallax View. So we get trashy too sometimes. But
like the thing, like 99% of the time on I You Suffer will just be me or Kit stumbling across the stupidest title for a movie. Like, literally something like just like Death Toilet. I'm like, yeah, we're obviously going to watch a movie called Death Toilet.
Of course, why wouldn't you?
And, sometimes it works out. A lot of the time it does not work out for us, but...
I'm still waiting for you guys to eventually do Wolf Cop, which is the movie that I have sort of staked a claim from the beginning of your podcast as the one that I want to guest on. So
the reason we haven't done it is, like I said, it's impossible almost most of the time for Kit and I to even line up schedule wise, let alone adding a fourth person.
No, for sure. I've got I got kids. I got stuff going on. I'm content to wait by the phone for that call.
We had like 2 years where like all three of us were in 3 different time zones. And so like trying to schedule anything, I would be like, all right, well, I'm available at like 5 p.m., which was like 4 p.m. Kit's time and like 2 p.m. Katie's time. And I was like, this sucks. Somebody else, all you move to the East Coast, please.
Yeah, actually, there is one. If there's an episode I think I would like to plug. Recently we brought Jeremy, who's going to be doing, I think you said your Halloween episode, right?
Yeah, Jeremy will be in the next one of these.
So Jeremy's been on the show a couple times, and the last time we had him on recently was for a rock and roll themed episode. And the movie that he picked was a movie called Paternoster and the Mission of Light, which is a low budget crowdsourced horror movie from I can never remember if it's North or South Carolina, Jeremy. I'm terribly sorry. It's from one of the Carolinas in his local neck of the woods that caught his attention, and so he brought it, and we got to watch it. And I think that I Hope You Suffer people would probably enjoy it. Think of it as what if High Fidelity turned into a low budget hippie cult horror movie?
Huh. Weird.
Yeah, it's I had a great time with it, and I think that would, if you know, if you're looking for some kind of crossover or overlap in audiences, I think that would be a good one.
I think the only episode Jeremy has done with us is we did Slaw, which was a Saw ripoff about somebody forcing people to eat coleslaw, if I remember correctly.
As the title would indicate, I guess.
I can't remember the exact plot, except that I remember it was a Saw ripoff, and Kevin Nash is in it at some point.
More wrestling fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for coming on finally. At some point, eventually, we'll get to Wolf Cop.
Hey, I'm here. I'm not. I ain't going anywhere.
It's been held for you for like 5 years. If people don't know, John created the theme song for I Hope You Suffer, and then we have Jeremy remix it anytime we have a remix that we need. So
yeah, arguably Jeremy's remixes are. I mean, I enjoy. I mean, the theme song, which was a blast for me to do, and is, if I'm being honest, probably the thing of mine that anyone has heard the most of, just by virtue of it being the theme song to your podcast. But anytime that you bring in Jeremy to remix it, it always brings a smile to my face. So I really appreciate what you and him do to it.
Yeah, he my favorite one so far is we've been doing, Katie and I cover like comic book movies on the Patreon, and we had him create one that's got the Ramon Spider-Man, the X-Men cartoon theme song, I think Batman the Animated Series theme song, and maybe something else in it, just like cut and pasted into it.
That's some Rob Zombie House of a Thousand Corpses shit right there, and I love it.
Like almost any time that we've had to I've been like, well, we're let's throw one of these into the main feed. It always gets flagged on fucking YouTube because of those songs being in it. But
right,
yeah. Again, thank you for watching one of these dumb movies with me. And
I had a good time, and if it helps you to fill the void left by your erstwhile co-hosts, I'm happy to help.
I mean, I feel like it would have just been Katie grumbling the whole time about how she.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to have a bad time.
Maybe Kit, I think probably okay with Devil's Rejects, but almost any. I'm very interested to hear what Kit's gonna think about Halloween 2, because I don't remember if he's seen anything past maybe Halloween, so. I know Katie has seen maybe 2 of Rob Zombie's movies and was like, no, I'm good on ever watching any of these ever again.
I feel like I'm almost spoiled at this point, having gotten the good one.
Yeah. If you really want to torture yourself, just dive into 31 at some point. It's bad, but like you said, Malcolm McDowell's in it for probably like 10 minutes.
There you go.
All right. If yeah, go check out John's albums. Go listen to his podcast. I'll be back next week with Jeremy talking about Rob Zombie's Halloween. Another fucking 2-hour movie for some reason.
Yep. What nothing can make a movie better than making it longer than the original, right?
Oh man. That's the one thing. Like I don't know. I can't complain too much because I will gladly sit through like 3 hours of like Avengers Endgame, but some of the movies we watch on this podcast that are like run close to 2 hours, I'm like, what are you doing? Don't stop making horror movies 2 hours.
Tight 90 and in and out.
Yeah. All right. I hope you suffer, but why?